Everyone. We're sitting with Dika Online, the maker of this world. We're testing out some nice new camera angles, so let's keep an eye on that. I think it's a really great build, and we're interviewing today Izak Potgieter. He's been doing some interesting work out of the University of UJ, or at least he's sponsored by UJ. He'll tell us more about that, and he's going to tell us a little bit about a recent AR experience he's doing around Johannesburg here. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Izak, maybe if you could just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and very briefly just kind of your intro into the XR world.
Sure. So I'm Dr. Izak Potgieter. I am currently a researcher at the University of Johannesburg, and I focus on XR, so VR and AR, for cultural heritage applications, specifically in Southern Africa. I also have my own company, Glassbox 3D, which has been pursuing the same goal. I actually have a master's and background in architecture. I then worked as an architect and realized working as an architect is not for me. After which I built some video games during my post-grad years, which, we learn how to make 3D models of buildings in architecture. Turning that into an interactive video game, it's just another step, really. So from that, I then got a short grant at the University of Johannesburg to do some XR and heritage work, and I haven't looked back since.
Sounds interesting. Do you want to tell us a little more particularly about the Melville project, maybe what that is a little bit about? I do want to go a little more into your history. I think my first intro to you was when you were still building the Sophiatown experience. We'll get into that a little bit later, but
yes.
maybe tell us a little more about the Melville Koppies experience that you're building, or recently launched, actually.
Yes, indeed. It was launched a week ago. Got good coverage, still getting some traction. Essentially, this was our first project, which I suppose has been launched permanently in the real world. The Sophiatown project has been at the Trevor Houston Center in Sophiatown for a long time, but it's kind of something they bring out for events and expos and the like. But this is now a fully functioning self-guided tour. There's a at least 500-year-old smelter built by the ancestors of today's Sesotho and Setswana speaking people in Johannesburg. And people in Gauteng, I think, we're all here from the city. We don't realize how ancient the city's history is. It's not something that's well known at all. I mean, I've lived in Melville, for example, for a long time. I didn't know this thing existed. It's there, and no one really knows what to do with it. It's the only protected smelter of its kind in Gauteng. Okay, so how can we use new technologies to actually develop our heritage sites so that we have more visitors, we have more awareness, and people can actually, start engaging with these sites so that there's a value proposition? So I created an augmented reality experience. We've got it in isiZulu, Setswana, Afrikaans, and English, which is important because we get a lot of school groups and they need to be able to learn in their own language. You scan the QR code. It's about 10 megabytes large, so it's really not a big experience for data, which is important. It can work with the cheapest smartphone, which is also important because we have a kind of a default to a video if it doesn't play in AR, but an interactive video. And then we have the smelter animated. You can see there's narration through storytelling. You'll see how it worked. We have like charcoal getting packed in it and iron ore getting packed in it and virtual flames. This object, which no one really knew what to do with, suddenly has a voice. And so far so good. It's working and people are engaging with it a lot more.
So when you talk a little bit about when you talk about people engaging with it, like the point of engaging with it is to learn more about the cultural heritage of the area, right?
Yes, absolutely. But also, to add value to our heritage sites, we need to bring in a lot more visitors, both locally and not locally, to this city. I think Cape Town can't carry all of South Africa's booming tourism, and it is a booming, tourism is increasing pretty quickly now in South Africa. So there are incredible sites all across the country, but I think it's all concentrated in a place like the Western Cape where that shouldn't be the case. So how do we actually use these sites and through new technology make it accessible, make it something people would want to visit and, for them to have something to do?
I thought it's kind of interesting. I mean, if you want to get into slightly political perspectives and, the decolonial inversion as such, you want to be in a space where you're saying, the story of African technology is usually told from, technology arriving from outside, quote unquote. And this project, this project is kind of like you take the most of contemporary available technology and you argue the opposite. You're kind of saying, this 500 years ago we had very sophisticated African metallurgical and engineering knowledge here. Now you're using contemporary technology to talk about technology that was 500 years ago, and it's not exactly an easy technology that either. What are your views there?
Not at all. I'm South African, and having grown up through the South African schooling system and history curriculum, you get the impression, or you did with the way it was structured back then, that everything kind of started, with colonialism, which is absolutely not true, not the case. We have a very rich ancient history, which people should be coming from all over the world to come engage with, but which we as South Africans should be engaging with as well. And we really took a lot of time and effort to get this right. We consulted with professors at UJ, at WITS, at UCT, people with a heritage background, people who have just been tour guides and hobbyists for decades at the site to make sure we get it correct. And it really paints a picture of just how innovative and advanced in a sense this technology was. I mean, they needed to use the exact right amount of charcoal from exactly the right tree, and they would work for 16 hours in shifts, and they had to keep an eye on the flame to make sure that it's correct, that it's not going to crack the smelter or going to create iron which doesn't actually melt. There was a whole social system to it, the way labor was organized, which is just completely different to the Western way that labor has been organized and technology has been deployed. And something like ironworking, it's one of those things which a lot of scholars believe has been independently invented in Africa. So it's a completely different process as well. There's a lot to be, I don't want to say proud, but there's a lot of innovation there and a lot that we can learn from. And it's all just kind of in the history books. So now with augmented reality, through storytelling, because we kind of told it like a story, and through animation, by making it visual, you can get someone who's 5 or 95 to engage with this, and after 3 minutes, they have, a thesis content worth of knowledge on this object. So I'm quite passionate about this because it's illuminating a history which is there, but which is chronically underdeveloped and has historically been neglected.
It seems like a great use of the technology, right? I mean, when people talk about augmented reality or virtual reality, usually their imagination jumps to gaming and, what you've taken in a completely different direction, like a artistic and academic direction, which I think is something that we all in this technology should be doing more of, is like trying to figure out how can we sort of make more beneficial results with our work rather than just flippant entertainment.
Absolutely. Nothing wrong with entertainment. I love the game myself, but it's a massive industry. Now you're competing with the world. But if you work with your context, I'm not competing with Europe for developing Southern African heritage. People will come to Southern Africa to experience Southern Africa's culture. So in a sense, there's a lot less, it's a lot less of a saturated market if you look at it in that way.
Can you tell us a little more about UJ's involvement and I went to, you launched it, when was it, about not quite 2 months ago, just over a month ago, there was a launch of their VR, for want of a better word, a hub of some sort, and I did go check it out.
Yes.
Can you maybe tell us a little more about that and your involvement in that arrangement?
Yes. So when I started at UJ, I got a research grant and got employed to build the Sophiatown in VR experience, which is a whole story in and of itself. And I was 23 at the time. So the fact that the university gave a research grant to a 23-year-old just says to you how forward-thinking UJ is and how willing they are to invest in young people. So I'm very impressed with UJ. But this VR lab, I needed my master's degree, I was employed, but now with this lab, anyone can just come and start developing, start coding, start building things in VR, or see what other students have done. So they've reduced the barrier of entry significantly. Where I needed my degree and my employment and all of that, now anyone can just come and start making. And it's attached to a broader VR lab, which will fulfill the kind of VR mandate of the different faculties, and there are all kinds of plans to expand it. But I think it's a move in the right direction. It's democratizing access because, students are bright. Students are bright and they are hungry, especially in a place like UJ. They are hungry to innovate. So you just have to reduce barrier to entry, honestly.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, I went to the Gauteng AI meetup the other day, and there were a lot of young people there. And I think one of the appealing factors to using AI to create your own business or try and create a product is the low barrier to entry. You can get a free tier of these vibe coding tools and bash something out relatively quickly. But it feels like AR and VR still does have slightly more barriers than just requiring a laptop. You need for AR you need a phone, for a VR you need a headset, at least for testing.
It does. I mean, everyone has a phone at this point, and even a lower end phone can still produce something. But I find one of the biggest barrier to entries is just showing people what's possible. I run a 1-week workshop at UJ where I just teach students how to build a simple AR app. We use Jigspace, and often they don't have any coding or 3D modeling experience whatsoever. I've had a student come in and I had to show file save as. It's that level of competency sometimes. But after 1 week, all of them were able to produce a simple augmented reality exhibit, and one got a job at Google. Several of them have went on to pursue their studies and build their own augmented reality apps. It's very doable. People just need to be shown, hey, it is doable, because we think it's something a massive team needs. You need a massive team, you need a big budget, which of course, sometimes it's that complex, you need that. But to just get started, it's actually quite simple, and you just need to show people what's possible a lot of the time, and then they take it from there.
Can you maybe tell us a little more about the Sophiatown project? I'm trying to remember now what year that was. I remember I came to see you guys. I think it's the first time I met you, and that was at UJ, and I came to I think it was a little bit premature what you showed me. I think it was very in a very sort of basic build at that time, but I was intrigued by the project as such. Maybe you can just give us a quick lowdown of what that project was and how that went.
Yeah, I remember you. It was in 2021 when I just started. I appreciate you coming to that, because indeed it was pre-alpha to a very large extent. But after my master's, I got this grant to do something about VR in Joburg. Okay. Ironically, the first idea was to do a VR experience of the Melville Koppies, and you can kind of see what Joburg is like, different landmarks. I kind of shot that idea down, and we kept asking ourselves, how is VR not a gimmick? Because we were kind of in the peak of the metaverse moment, when we were all going to live in the metaverse and we're all going to be in the Matrix. And
those were good days. Those were good days.
Well. Those were good days. A lot of enthusiasm, but people don't want to live outside of the real world 24/7. But one solution was, it's like a new art form. It's like film, but you are getting a spatial experience. And as an architect, that's very interesting to me, that you can give people these spatial experiences as like art. So one practical application I thought makes sense is to show what places used to look like spatially, which do not still physically exist, but which are important nonetheless, of which there are many in South Africa. District 6, Sophiatown, Marabastad. Because of our past, a lot of the spaces which we deem as being very important to our history, because they are, don't physically exist, but everyone knows about them. So how can we unlock value in those sites? So that led to the Sophiatown project, where we did multiple interviews with former residents of Sophiatown, and I developed a whole methodology with my PhD on how to turn someone's memory of a place into a physical representation that they will recognize as being true. And that was really the launch pad for what I do now. People received it very well, and I exhibited it today, 5 years later, so it's still being exhibited often, and people are still enamored by the idea.
Definitely a theme that runs through a lot of your projects so far.
What?
Time travel.
Yeah, it is a kind of time travel, but you need to be careful to not say we're recreating it, we're just representing it. Like, we can't go back to the past, and we're very explicit about that. But to show people what the past was actually like, or must have been like, it unlocks people's imagination. And, there's something about access to these spaces which were lost as well, which is really important.
I can't remember now when you're telling me the story, but it was an interesting story on this particular I think it was the Sophiatown project. You were telling me a story about, and to Deek's point about time travel and recreating things. I mean, yes, there's a journalism adjacent type aspect there, whereby you can't just recreate things and sort of make it fit into the project to make it better. But there was a sense of you did quite a lot of oral history. Like, you went to people and you asked them, what did it look like, or you showed them old photos and you asked them that it was real, or how did you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because this is not new necessarily. We have plenty of VR experiences of heritage sites. And through my research, I've identified two big industries in the world where this has been implemented almost to market saturation. One is in Europe, and these experiences tend to focus on recreating what a site looked like. So maybe you visit the Colosseum, you put on a VR headset, and you see what it looked like before, the day it was built, fresh coat of paint. And then there's a very big industry in China as well, where they've actually recreated a lot of their own traditional arts and crafts. So you have all these experiences documenting how to weave bamboo mats or make jade carvings, or documentation of indigenous knowledge, which is really interesting. But I think there's a case to be made, in our case, for working with oral history, which is how history has always been taught in Africa, and still is taught in many cases. It's through storytelling. And to have a visual accompaniment to that is quite powerful. So one of the reasons I also chose Sophiatown as a kind of topic is it's not possible to recreate it in the way that these experiences have been recreated before. We don't have that many photographs or videos, or it's not a site which is well documented. But it still exists within people's memories. So we had hours and hours of interviews and kind of working with oral history, cross-referencing different people who remember actually living there and recreating it from memory, which is a unique approach. And what's great about that is you don't just get what this place looked like, but you get all the stories that people remember. Why this place was important in the first place, because it's what happened there. It's the stories, right? For example, there's a big VR experience of Anne Frank House. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
No.
I mean, it's pretty good, but it's still very visual. So you see the site and you're kind of like, okay, this is where she lived, that's cool. But getting the stories of why the site was interesting, I mean, that I'm finding a lot more engagement with that because of it. So not only do you get more information from ethnographic data, especially if you don't have other data like photos or videos, but you get the intangible side as well, the stories. And that's what people really engage with. And I think that's something that I center in my own practice and what sets this apart. Even with the Melville Koppies project, it's not an academic, read out of what the smelter was, and in 1999 this person excavated this. It's a story. They're telling the story of the smelter, and it changes engagement a lot. It really does.
Like, do you when you do these interviews, do you specifically try and drill into some of the architectural details in order to get like a more sort of sense of the atmosphere?
What works well is I do have prepared questions, but I encourage people to just talk, and some people speak for a few minutes, some people speak for hours and hours and hours. And you want that because often there's a logic in the sequence in which people remember things and they're building up to something, and you want to get their unique perspective of an event. What helps with the architecture, though, is to have a prototype built, which I did do, and then to go to a former resident. For example, I built a draft of Sophiatown based on a few initial interviews and photos and videos where I could find them. So there are a few, but not very many. And then I took them in VR. Okay, this is someone who's like 90 years old. And I said, do you recognize this place? And it was at the point where the guy could say, this is the Odin Cinema. The movie posters you have on the left, but they were always on the right. This sign is red, but it was actually green. You know, I would never have known to ask that. I would never have gotten that information unless they had something to respond to. So that way, it works quite well to get the architectural verification, I suppose. Really, and it's amazing. It happened 70 years ago, but I could remember like where the movie posters were on the wall. It's incredible how well people can remember these things.
And it doesn't have to be like one-to-one realism. You know, it's a representation of the space, right?
I think saying it's a representation is very freeing because we cannot bring it back, and I think it's disingenuous and, you know, politically quite dodgy to say I'm bringing something back. I can't. I can just represent something as best I can.
So how are you... Go ahead.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, I mean, just Deek, if you got something else in that particular area, just to shut up. But I was just going to say, you know, what's next for you, say, in the next 5 years in terms of your... I mean, there's loads of places in Joburg that you can explore. There's lots of interesting visually interesting places with great stories behind them. Is your practice, you effectively want to be in a heritage space, or how are you thinking about your work moving forward?
Yes, I think my niche is in the heritage space, and that is what I've always been passionate about. So I'm fine with that being my career. I'm excited about it being my career, and there's good feedback. So we're in talks to launch the Melville Koppies AR at Museum Africa next, which is a good next step. And then there are several other projects on the kind of back burner. Can I talk about them? I'm trying to think. I'm not under an NDA, so I think I can. But there are a bunch of heritage spaces. Some are in Limpopo. 2 of them are in Limpopo, and a few are in Soweto. And then there's another one in Sophiatown, for which some are more advanced than others, but depending on what happens first, there are definitely a bunch of sites that want to have the solution kind of implemented. So I actually think I'm onto something here. You know, at first, because I also have my own company while working for UJ, and UJ's kind of been able to be the seed funding for what I do, you know, being able to support me, and I can work with their reputation to get this out there, because there's not that much demand for what I do, because people don't even know it's an option. You know, they don't understand. That's why you need to kind of build something first, show something first, show people what's possible, and then maybe the demand comes. I guess that's what happens when you're, you know, one of the firsts in an industry in a region. But I'm finding more and more that there is demand for what I do, so it's exciting. I think I will be busy for the foreseeable future. It's looking like it, if I could answer it like that.
There's a lot of history, yeah. There's a lot
Indeed.
Of history, right?
But I mean, we are internationally known for being a very diverse cultural country, but it's underdeveloped. And you know, we also have an interesting opportunity right now. I was at a conference last year in Barcelona on this, where I presented. And I met a woman from Qatar, an American woman actually, but she lives in Qatar. And she was hired by the royal family to do the whole cultural museum strategy for the country, you know, as they kind of move towards diversifying away from oil revenue. So they just became rich overnight, you know, and moved from thousands of years of being nomadic to, you know, owning flats in Hyde Park in a generation. And she says she found it incredibly difficult to still find original first-hand cultural knowledge to display. She says she cannot believe what a difficult task that is. You know, South Africa will be a success. It's kind of inevitable. I think we have the right recipe in terms of our baseline laws and constitution, the dynamism of the place. It's just a matter of time for all the pieces to fall together. But right now, we still have a lot of first-hand access to people who are very intimately still living cultural lives. So there's in a strange way, there's an opportunity to you know, turn that into a living heritage, which is economically valuable, and not just have it get lost as a country becomes wealthy instantly. So I think it's interesting to have seen that what we have, someone like a country like Qatar would have loved to have, and it showed me that, hey, there's actually interesting moment here where we have an opportunity to work with what we have, you know.
I mean, I think I'm going to put myself a little bit on the limb here, but you know, I'm getting. You said just now that South Africa is inevitably going to be successful, which is a bold statement, but I think it's probably true, in the sense that there are a few pieces of the puzzle that seem to be coming together. They're in terms of international interest as well, and also South Africa's sort of play on the international stage. And I don't even mean politically. I just mean culturally as well. Just there's, you know, in terms of music,
Yeah.
in terms of your creative arts, there's quite a lot of activity going on that of an interest in, you know, to use the whole continent, say Africa, and South Africa is still very much an interesting entry point. And I think there's just a few things coming together that's you know, we're going to start seeing property prices in Joburg be the same as in Cape Town, you know, just because of the interest in this particular part of the world. I mean, it's I also feel, unless outside of some sort of a grave sort of disaster of some sort, you know, I think it's also almost inevitable that this is going to become quite a nice hub, a global hub for a lot of things.
Yeah, well, you can, I mean, that's what I believe. And I think it's a belief rooted in facts and noticing just what we have here. And yeah, it's a kind of frontier in a sense, you know, but a frontier is open, which is good.
Mm.
And there aren't many frontiers in the world, you know, left in a sense. I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know if that's a controversial statement.
Nah.
In a sense, what I think a lot of your work in rediscovering history is a frontier in itself, right? There are so many things that are sort of hidden from plain view that we can rediscover and relearn and appreciate all over again. So I think frontiers is an interesting angle as well, I think.
Yeah,
Even
absolutely.
looking backwards.
And you know, the road to success will be through our own culture. I mean, part of what made Japan one of the biggest economies in the world is they leveraged their own indigenous culture. And, you know, South Korea has done the same now to create incredible value. And there's really no reason why we can't achieve the same. I mean, it's already happening in many respects.
Yeah.
Well, tourism is big business, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, but also exporting
people-
of music and culture, and not just surface level, but actually, you know, the stories and ideologies and ways of being and living embedded in that. So the first step towards that is actually representing that, you know?
and music, the arts, you know,
Yeah.
perspective.
And just the way of life that is enabled through, you know, representing how culture works.
So, what more can you tell us about? We've asked you some projects that are still on the go that you given us give us some insight for. I guess the question from my side would be, I mean, maybe that's just my previous profession that's slipping in here a little bit. I do care about volume, like I care about audience volumes, and I care about access, and I care about how to get the story out there and its usage. What are your, in terms of what you do? How would you consider your metrics? I don't want to say success per se, but maybe that is what I mean. And just in terms of, okay, you put in the work, you built this out, you know, as long as, I suppose, if there's a consistent ongoing usage and there's an education angle to it, are you happy, or what more are you looking for?
You know, I think it's simple. I'm in Algeria. I can't remember the name of the place, but there's a full, pretty well-preserved Roman city, which you can just go to. Nobody knows about that place. It's like on the level of Pompeii, but everyone goes to Pompeii. So if we can use these new technologies to, one, bring a lot more visitors to these sites, but two, to make these sites known. You know, this Melville Koppies smelter was there. No one really knew what to make of it, except for some academics or very interested people. But now, because you've developed it and you've said this is actually important for these reasons, now it becomes important. And the idea is to have more visitors to the copies, which seems to already be happening, which I'm very pleased about. So I've proven the value proposition. But also, you know, for these sites to now enter our collective consciousness, they become sites which we can speak to and which we can make part of our story and argue over and take stewardship of. And I think that's really important on the other side. So it's not just about, bringing in tourists. You see, there's this thing on Robben Island where they're turning some of the prison cells into Airbnbs. And I'm just like, oof, you guys are missing the point quite badly here now. I don't know if you know what you're doing. But that's what happens if you just go for, value from tourism. But it is one side. A lot of these sites are NGOs who are struggling. So you want value to increase. You want visitors to come and engage with these sites. You want these sites to become important significantly. I mean, you go to Switzerland to see the Matterhorn. There are loads of mountains that look like that. Sorry to the Swiss. But this is the one that's branded. This is the one that's on the Toblerone. People go to this one. So ultimately, it's also a PR exercise for these sites to say, hey, these unknown sites are actually important and valuable for objective reasons. Let's write them into our history. Let's, take stewardship of them. I think those are my two metrics. Adding a tangible economic value to a site, but also having us take ownership of these sites and, that we can be proud of our history. We have a lot to be proud of and a very deep history.
Cool.
And not just because of what it is, but, there's a lot of innovation embedded in these stories and these sites, which need to be decoded.
100%.
Yeah. For example, I did another project with the Sun Council, as in the Khoi Sun, although they're separate. Khoi and Sun are actually separate, where we did a kind of VR animated rock art experience of some myths around the night sky and the moon. And, you look at a piece of Sun rock art, but you don't understand what you're looking at is a story. And inside that story, there's embedded cultural knowledge about how the world works in which they understood it, but also, there's a logic to it, which actually makes a lot of sense once you decode it. So technology can turn these static objects, like a piece of rock art, into it's almost like a movie all of a sudden. And you're just like, oh, wow, this actually makes sense. Like, people have always been smart. We kind of see ourselves as being much more advanced in the modern world, but it's just different worldviews, and there's a lot we can learn from other worldviews.
100%. Deep.
I had a technical question. So when we started this thing, Scott said, Deep, you should jump in because maybe you can get under the hood a little bit with these things. So if you'll indulge me one technical question, you built the recent Melville Koppies app using Needle tools and Unity, but your background's more with Blender, right? So how did you find that whole process?
Oh my gosh. I will tell you now. It started with 3D modeling. I started on SketchUp, which I thought at the time was the most incredible thing I've ever discovered. Now I look at SketchUp and it's like Microsoft Paint. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? But that shifted to Blender, which I still think is an incredible tool and democratized access to 3D modeling. I don't think we know how much Blender has done for this industry. Then I shifted to Unreal Engine. And Unreal is great, I find, for virtual reality production. And I enjoy the node-based coding before AI. Now AI exists, so I'm less scared of traditional coding, which is also a big boost to what we're capable of achieving. But for AR, I've always used Unity. I've worked with Jigspace before, which is an Australian company. They're great for very quickly creating AR experiences, very user-friendly, great support. Then I worked with Euphoria for creating basic interactive experiences, but that creates an APK, so an app you have to download. Now, for the first time, I've worked with the Needle Engine, which is by a German company. They also provided great support. They were very much patient with me. I think we had a few sessions online where they provided support to my project, which I'm very appreciative of. But now we're able to scan and immediately it plays. And go to the waterfront in Cape Town. There's a AR experience there of the waterfront's history. Nobody knows about it, okay? Because if you go there, you scan the QR code. No offense to whoever made that. But after 5 minutes, I couldn't get it to work on my phone and I just left. And I imagine everyone else feels the same way. So with Needle, I was able to produce an experience which it scans, it plays, it compresses very well. So even though my model was quite heavy, it compressed it immensely to just be around 9 megabytes, which is great. It ran smoothly, and it's able to work on Android and iOS simultaneously, which is also a big barrier I've had before, having to go through completely different ecosystems. And if the phone isn't AR compatible, which is important in South Africa, where a lot of people have budget smartphones, it still plays. So that's a great solution I found, and I will be using them moving forward, because if someone scans a QR code and nothing happens, or they have to download an extra app, they give up, and I would as well. So you need something where you scan, it works, there you go. So Needle has been great for that, and I'm pleased I found out about them.
Yeah. Especially now that eighth wall is not an option. Needle tool seems.
Yeah, I don't know why they. Well, I don't know why they jumped ship, hey. They were onto something there, but it is what it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I did hear some of that stuff got open source, thankfully, so that's hopefully somebody can carry it.
Still, without technical support, it's still difficult.
Well,
especially if you...
ChatGPT.
Yeah, but I would not have been able to produce this app if I didn't have real humans helping me on this one.
It's good to hear.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, that's fascinating, man. I'm finding your work really interesting, and I hope it gets. I mean, it sounds like you're getting some rolling support, which is great, and I think I'm quite happy to see some more of your builds, man, wherever they appear, whatever platform and whatever manner.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm not too keen on publishing these to an app store, because I don't know how many people actually engage with the app store or have VR headsets or the like. But it's good to have these on site, so people actually have a reason to visit the site. And that's been a model that I think has been working quite well. But yeah, come to the Melville Koppies. It's a beautiful part of Joburg. It's a nature reserve. It's much larger than you think. And it's unique in the world for being a nature reserve so close to a CBD of a city. So yeah, it's worth a visit. I'd love to hear your feedback on it.
Nice. Perfect.
If people want to get in touch with you, they go to Glassbox 3D. What's the website? Yeah,
just visit my website, Glassbox 3D, and pop me an email. Let's connect, or just find me on LinkedIn.
That.co.za.
Glassbox3D.com. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for your time.
Google Glassbox 3D, you'll find me.